Right, welcome Rebecca and Jacob. We're here today to obviously discuss some novels that we've been reading lately. In your case, it's a play. So thank you for attending today, and thank you also for the audience for paying good attention. Now, Rebecca, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about your novel, please?
Oh yes, mine is Warm Bozzies by Isaac Marion. It's a zombie one, you know how I love my zombies. But it's a little bit more than that. It's actually a really great coming of age story. It's got all of those elements of coming of age stories. I mean, we think about things like Harry Potter, Bambi, the traditional, killing off of the parental figure, resulting in the young person having to discover their own inner strength and go against society to find their true selves. And it does it in such a way that's really, really engaging and really intelligent. Right in the beginning, for instance, like people say, zombie narrative's not that exciting.
Yeah, just about bodies walking around, stalking the place.
Absolutely, but here he's actually making a statement about consumerism and the way that it reduces people's identities to just their jobs. So as a zombie, he's trying to work out who he was, he can't remember. And he looks at everybody else as well, and here's a wonderful quote, So we make random guesses. You were a waitress, you were a student. Ring any bells? It never does. And it's all set out spaced on the page like that. So he's talking about after the apocalypse, when society has crumbled, these things that used to be our whole identity, our jobs, now are meaningless to us.
Okay, well, great. Thanks, Rebecca. We'll come back to
Love
more
this
details. I'm glad. I've recently been watching some zombie TV series, and yes, I've got over that initial trauma of watching these dead bodies, but there's a lot involved in it.
There really is. They make statements on society.
Yeah, I can just see from the cover that it's also very involving and a lot more about issues. Jacob, over to your play, I believe, No Sugar.
Yes, No Sugar by Jack Davis, phenomenal Noongar writer.
I met him once.
You met him?
I did, yes. I was at a play production of No Sugar and I met him.
Wow, that's incredible. Wow. I'm going to have to hear more about that story. But this play is set in 1930s Australia, Western Australia, and it just follows two families, the Millimora family and the Munday family, as they are struggling with this period in Australia, kind of dark period, called during 1930s. It was kind of centred around this assimilation policy, where they were taking Aboriginal people, and essentially they were trying to rid of their Aboriginal culture and replace it with white values. Now this is a story about this family that are resettled from their home. I forget where they're initially situated. Can you help me out?
They're initially situated near Northam, and they get moved to Moore River.
Moore River
Yeah,
settlement.
Moore River settlement, exactly. So
they actually have this society set up. It is destroyed.
absolutely
like in that
devastating.
movie, Rabbit Proof Friends, quite a few
Yes.
grade schools study that.
Yes, yeah, very similar.
Heartbreaking. Get your tissues ready.
Exactly, and it's devastating because we know Aboriginal people have a strong sacred connection to land, and that is utterly devastated by these white settlers who have assumed power, and they steal them from their home and they put them in the settlement, and it's tough, but we see a lot of these characters resist, and they resist in very powerful, subtle, really intelligent ways, and it's quite a beautiful part of this novel, something I really found really interesting.
Yeah, it's a fascinating play.
Yes.
I really enjoyed reading that too.
Yeah.
Sad though as well.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you're talking about displacement because detention is very much about that, but instead of being about Aboriginal people, it's about people from Afghanistan in particular. The novel's called Detention. It's by Tristan Banks, and it's a contemporary novel. 2019 was when it was written, and one of the things that I have been teaching this to my classes, and a lot of the students are really enjoying it, so it's great to see. Now, a lot of people don't think very much about refugees, particularly when you're only, year 8, but it's obviously a very controversial and involving subject in our society. There's an awful lot of controversy about should you put refugees in detention centres, should they be allowed into the country, etc., etc. And you get a range of views. I guess one of my fascinations about refugees stems from the fact that one of my friends once was working on the Manus Island detention centre, and so I got some involved stories from her, including one of the situations where the whole camp was on lockdown because of a tension that was brewing. I won't go into detail about that, but that was brewing, and as a result of that, they were in lockdown. She was hiding under a desk like a lot of the other employees. So very sad situation to see. From my perspective, detention centres exist, and that people feel the need to fly from their countries in order to get safety. The only other novel or biography I've read really that's about this is the Ando story of the happiest refugee. Very powerful. Okay, that's a little bit about our book so far. In terms of, we've touched on these as well, but in terms of the plot, one of the fascinating things about all the plots is that they really need to draw reluctant readers in. So chapter 1 is crucial for that. Can you say anything about your opening or the exposition of your novel?
Absolutely. That's one thing that Warm Bodies does really, really well. I actually use it sometimes with reluctant readers because of that. For a start, they swap over the zombie narrative by having the protagonist is a zombie. And they just use some really beautiful humour that really works quite well for high school students, because you guys are all so sarcastic, you just are. So it starts off with, I'm dead, but it's not so bad. I've learnt to live with it. And just the irony of it, and that paragraph ends with, my friend M says, the irony of being a zombie is that everything is funny, but you can't smile because your lips are rotted off. And honestly, just the humour of this character, and which something that our Year 12s didn't realise is there's a little bit of a satirisation of teenage boys occurring here. The idea that, you know, on the inside you're this complex, articulate, warm creature, person with all these ideas, but as far as the outside world sees you, you're this drooling, shambling thing that just goes, So it really gets that humour of exploring the societal view of boys and men in a way that is quite engaging for that audience, which, you know, it is aimed at a young adult audience, so that's a really appropriate way to engage with them and get them to relate.
Definitely, thank you. Now, Jacob, the issue with you is that if a play wasn't enjoyed from the start, then not only do they they wouldn't just close the book, they would walk out of the theatre.
They would walk out, yeah. By the time it gets to Act 2, you'd have half the audience in there. But fortunately, Act 1 is very engaging. We meet the Millamore family, and they're playing cricket. Playing cricket with a bunch of like make-do bats.
Yeah, they are. They're just, you know, that fairly quintessential family, you know. To me it's 1970s, of course, because that's when I was a child,
yeah.
But the 1930s, you know, playing cricket, fighting with your family, making fun of the news.
Yeah, very relatable, very resourceful. I guess it kind of breaks down the idea that the Aboriginal people are the other.
Yeah.
You know, it allows us to jump into like kind of this family dynamic, and it's not that different. And it's a warming invitation to us relating with them, and by us I mean my audience, not necessarily singling anybody out, but it just allows for this kind of, you know, relatable family unit.
That's his aim, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, that's his stated aim. He considered it a political act for an Aboriginal person to write. And the idea of, you know, white Australians who have no concept of Aboriginal families, quite often, certainly in the 80s when that was made, to see inside the walls of an Aboriginal family. And you'd know more because you actually met him.
More briefly at a play, so
Yeah.
I can't say I know him in much detail. I'll be brief about the beginning of this one simply because of the confines of time, but this also focuses on a family, but not just a family, a whole group of about 50 refugees. You would think a novel about detention would start in a detention centre and then maybe progress to eventually an escape. Well, that's different. In this novel, starts from the escape. So 50 refugees are sitting or lying on the floor and someone is helping them to escape by slipping through the fence. So that sense of action and suspense at the start is very gripping, so involves the reader very quickly. Through the book, through the first chapter, it mentions the word snip, 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 as it's gradually being snipped away and people are trying to get through this fence, which, once they get through this fence is symbolic of freedom, or imprisonment. Beyond the fence is freedom. So it's gripping and involving, and one of the other aspects of suspense here is that the character is trying to hold back a sneeze, and unfortunately she can't hold it back, and so that causes the soldiers and the police force to jump on them trying to escape.
So sound devices are really important as part of engaging you in that reality they're constructing.
Yeah, definitely. And throughout the book there's an awful lot of examples of alliteration, sound devices, bang, we've mentioned a chapter where someone was hiding in the toilet, one of the central characters are hiding in the toilet and so on. Anyway, there's so much we can talk about. So it's, we've already gone beyond our
Let's
8
swap.
minutes.
Let's all swap. We'll take each other's books.
One final thing I wanted to mention maybe, because we've talked about issues, we've talked about language, we've talked about the plot devices and somewhat about characters. Point of view is one area that I like to mention. That book there, Detention, alternates points of view between Dan and Seema, who are the central characters of the book. And in doing so, just gives her that insight about how they're feeling. Dan is an Australian boy who has had no experience with refugees and is totally ignorant about how to deal with refugees at the start of the novel, but he changes when he gradually meets her. So that's interesting from that perspective.
How did that come into contact?
Oh, in a chapter called Face to Face. She's hiding in the toilet.
Yeah, okay.
Their school is in lockdown because they know that a whole lot of detainees have been come out of imprisonment of the detention centre, and they've escaped. And so he's meant to be in lockdown, but he's busting her at the toilet, or says he is. He actually has got an ulterior motive of trying to get water for a dog he's just rescued, and hence the symbolism that he's rescuing her.
I don't know if I like that symbolism as a woman.
And anyway, he goes toilet and then he notices that someone is in there, and so the suspense that builds up, and eventually she's got a piece of glass against his throat when he eventually opens the door.
So you're almost taking a societal sort of like almost bird's eye view of different, by alternating multiple first person perspectives to get a societal view of the issue.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mine's quite different. Mine's the idea of, that very personal third person, well actually it's first person, there's limited single one. Again, because they're trying to create that sort of like perspective of a young man. And your one, of course, is a play, but it does have a perspective.
Yeah. A rich Aboriginal perspective.
Yeah, very much the idea of Aboriginal perspective of history.
Well, thank you very much. I think we've covered so much about the books already, even though there's more, and definitely that's a book that I would like to read.
Yes, you should. It's really good.
So thanks for coming, and I hope the Year 8s have benefited from listening to our panel discussion.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.